Can y'all hear me? All right. Get our technology up and running. Good to see everybody here this morning. Temperatures cooled off a little bit for us this week. It felt fantastic, didn't it? No complaints. I hear you. It felt like everybody had a little more pep in their step this week. Just makes your energy better. Thank you for being here. We're continuing on. This is, I think, our fourth week together in this series that we're working through called Uncomfortable. And some of you have been here the previous 3 weeks, and some maybe not. That's all right. We're just really been talking about a lot of the things that come at us in life that are not real comfortable, and they're really contrary to our human nature. Our human nature is really more about chasing comfort, whether you want to admit that or not. That's really, I've never met a person, I don't think, maybe one, that their nature is not about chasing human comfort and wanting to see how they can arrange their day or their week or their month to be as comfortable and pleasurable as possible. And so it's tough, and it's contrary sometimes to the way, probably shouldn't even say sometimes, to the way God works. It seems contrary to the way God works most all the time. And so it can be difficult for us, can be really difficult for us as Christians to maybe be what God envisions us to be in terms of being servants of His, being workers of His, being people that are laboring for Him. If we just spend all of our time chasing comfort and comfortable moments and comfortable situations. And we talked a little bit about in the first few weeks of this class about how I really think it's a generational thing where it becomes exponentially tougher for younger generations. And you define that how you want to, you know. Does that start at age 14, 15, 16? Is that the younger generations in my mind that I think about are teenagers, 20s, 30s, maybe 40s, you know. A lot of you are going, yep, keep on going. You know, those are the younger generations that seem maybe to be softer and softer in their response to tough, uncomfortable situations. I said, I think in the first class that we had here together, that I really felt like the older generations, I think of my grandparents, they did uncomfortable a whole lot better than the 16, 17, 18-year-olds do today. And it's almost just kind of natural. It's like my grandparents didn't have a choice. They did not. Okay, it's just the way things were. And so, but there seems to be this conflict in God's eternal kingdom that says the more you chase comfort, the more you're about yourself and making sure you arrange things real comfortable for yourself. It just seems contrary to God's nature, God's very nature. And so we started looking at, you'll remember, a handful of people. We probably could have looked at a whole lot more. I've got several more in mind, but we looked at Joseph, we looked at Moses, we looked at Mary, the mother of Jesus, we looked at Paul, just a handful of people that God called to do specific things through, some very important missions through, and every single one of them, He put them in really, really tough, uncomfortable situations where it would have been really easy for any of them to shake their head and go, no, I'm not doing this, okay? As a matter of fact, you know, I think of Moses, he tried to say, I'm not your guy. I'm not doing this. I'm not tough enough for this. This isn't me, okay? Y'all remember that? Us talking about those people. And so really, as we have gone through some of this series, we've talked a whole lot about how important it is in the way that we think in our minds, in our response to the things that come at us weekly, okay? Because really, I think all of us, as we go around the room, could probably tell stories about things that came at you in the last week or 2 weeks or month. You probably don't have to think much further than that, okay? We could spend several hours in here, everybody telling their story about the rough things that have come at you in the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, okay? And often our response sees that as just worldly. We get angry. We fight it. We battle it. We're upset about it. We're stressed about it. We wake up in the middle of the night at 3 in the morning and stare at the ceiling for an hour, and we can't go back to sleep. And everybody feel what I'm saying? But in some of these things, and we talked last week about what Paul wrote in Romans here. Do not be conformed to this world. That's hard to do. That's hard not to be conformed to this world and think on a worldly level. That's what we're programmed to want to do. But be transformed by the renewal of your mind. So important of the way we think. Think everyone that you probably know that does really well and walks in great faith and great spirit and positive mindset. It is because of this, because they renew they think the right way. Okay? I can't remember where it's at. As a man thinks, so is he. It's in Proverbs somewhere. Don't get me lying to you, okay? As a man thinks, as we think, okay? So our minds have to be right. And I could say the opposite of that. Every one of us know people, and a lot of times they're people that might be really close to us, loved ones that struggle and are struggling because their minds cannot handle what's coming at them because they're thinking on a worldly level instead of an eternal level, okay? And some of these things that God sends at us or allows to be sent at us weekly, we might not identify as being, this is okay. It's from God. You're going to be all right. You're going to grow from this. You're going to have a chance to do really well from this. Let me finish that. The renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God and what is good and acceptable and perfect. So, the will of God sometimes comes at us differently than what we would like for it to come at us, right? We'd love to think, I talk sometimes in here about like favor of God, FOG, that's my nickname, short for that, F-O-G, favor of God, And we spoke in recent weeks about Mary, the mother of Christ, And she was told directly by Gabriel, you're highly favored. You are highly favored. How many of you in here would love for an angel to come to you and say, hey, you are highly favored? I'd like for that to happen later today to me, okay? I don't know how much more affirmation you could feel than that. Agree? Amen. Hey, you who are highly favored, by the way, you're pregnant at age 16 and we don't know who the father is, and you're going to go through all this embarrassment and people are going to wonder why. And And so a lot of times, favor of God doesn't really come at us the way that we drew it up. We looked at, I think I showed you a graphic last week of just kind of an architectural graphic that was, we draw these things up in our minds of the way we have planned for them to go. And a lot of the times they don't go that way. And we get frustrated with it, we get flustered, whatever the word is. We do not respond. Our response, our perspective to what's coming at us doesn't recognize it for what it is. Okay? I've heard Craig Rochelle say before, any of you that listen to him, I know Jeremy does, so, that sometimes that growth comes packaged as pain. Sometimes the growth that God has planned for you comes packaged as pain. That's tough. Okay, we don't like that. God says in Isaiah 55, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts." Man, I try. I really do. I read that and I go, well, I'm going to try to get my thoughts to line up with God's thoughts. I really want my thoughts to be the same as God's thoughts. You ever thought that? If my thoughts aren't God's thoughts, if they're not the same, how can I try to get closer to that? Well, it's all up here in my brain somewhere. Okay? My thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are my ways your ways. And he's talking about the way we perceive the world, our earthly thoughts, what we're programmed by this world to try to, the ways the world wants us to think, as opposed to the way God thinks eternally. Okay? We're continuing to review here. We talked about how God doesn't want your comfort to increase. He's not interested in how many more vacations can he send you on to the beaches of Mexico and all that kind of stuff, all right? That's not his concern. That's not what he's worried about. And there's nothing wrong with that. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit, okay? He's more interested in your growth in the ways that he can use you. And so you'll remember us talking about that. I don't know if we got here. Clint's not in here. This is one of Clint's least favorite verses of the Bible when you listen to Clint. James writes in James chapter 1, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds." That's already a tough verse to digest when you just read that first half of it there, okay? Because I don't know any of us that can consider it just pure joy, okay? But it's really talking about our mindset and our response to the things that come at us daily and weekly and monthly. Yes? Who? Oh, yep.
One way we can consider joy is if all these things are coming at us, that means we must be doing something right because Satan is trying to get us.
That's true. That's true also. She said a lot of the times it's pure joy because a lot of these things come at us because Satan might be throwing things at you to try to get your mind off course, to make you begin to doubt, to make you begin to lose faith that God's in control. That is a way for us to look at that as pure joy. Whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith, and that's what we're just talking about, produces perseverance. Okay?
It also might strengthen your faith. I mean,
Right.
the way you handle things, it depends on where your faith is. As you grow in your faith, you can handle things better.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. It's all connected. The testing of your faith, your perseverance, how resilient are you to what's coming at you and those tests that come at you, and still being able to understand and know that God's in control ultimately. It's so we worked through a lot of this is just kind of review from recent weeks and us talking about some of these people that we've talked about. hopefully to help you, no matter who you are, no matter what age you are, no matter what phase of life you are in, there are things coming at you, and how do you respond to those, and how do you process those things, and can you remain faithful, can you remain resilient, and can you keep that good frame of mind and knowing and trusting that God's in control of all of those things. Oh, I didn't have that up. So how do you react when God tries to pry you out of your comfort zone? And I use that word pry because I think the more anchored you are into your comfort zone, the more He really has to maybe work on you to get you out of that comfort seat. You might think, why? I don't understand. Wouldn't it have been nice, I mean, if God would have just created and we were just all designed to just be laying in hammocks and just taking naps, and it was just great comfort and peace, and life was just, I mean, and here's the truth, I guess he did really until sin entered the world, right? I mean, the Garden of Eden was perfect, and Adam and Eve had everything just perfect, and everything was, but we live in a world that sin entered, and it changed things. I don't know why. You don't know why. But that's where we are today. That's the world we live in. Sorry, go ahead.
We really grow, though, if everything was easy for us. It's only through our tribulations that we actually grow physically.
Mm-hmm.
Mentally,
You're right.
emotionally.
Yep. Juanita's just talking about that there is no growth without the struggles and the pain, and I mean we could all sit here and talk for an hour on that, you know, from all the analogies that we could throw out there, no pain, no gain, and just all the things. We know that, and you're right. If we're going to grow, it doesn't happen by laying in that hammock. It just happens through tougher situations and struggles. Go ahead, Will.
When you say it like that, pry us out of our comfort zone, it kind of makes me wonder, do we know when we're in our comfort zone?
Well, you do when it gets taken away from you.
But
Yeah.
are we aware?
Well, that's great. You got one slide ahead of me because my next slide says, do you recognize it when He does try to pry you out of your comfort zone? It's a great question.
We have two comfort zones. We have a physical and a mental comfort zone. We can be in a
Physical comfort zone and a mental, yeah. Saying you can be in a physical comfort zone, you can be in a mental comfort zone. I guess you could be in both. But do you recognize it when those things come at you? If I were to go, all right, let's just go back in your mind in the last week, and I pick anybody out. Mr. Parker, in the last month, did you recognize those things that God sent at you as opportunities for growth? Jeremy, Bobby, Stan, did you recognize, maybe in just the last week, you prayed your prayers? I pray that God makes me better in my 50s, 60s, and 70s than I was in my 20s, 30s, and 40s. Okay? Which I pray that prayer. And then all of a sudden something comes at me, and I get mad and frustrated, and I don't, and at the end of the week I go, oh wow, that was a chance. That was a chance for me to have handled that way better than I did when I was 20 and that came at me. That shouldn't be too hard to do for me in my 50s to be able to handle something better than I did in my 20s. Okay? But do you recognize that when it comes at you? It's about our perception. It's about our response. It's about what's happening to us, and not just seeing it as some happenstance, just, by the way, this just happened today. It's understanding that God's in control, and He's giving you opportunities. He's putting you in places. He's giving you some situational things that you have a chance to respond to in a positive way, in a growth mindset kind of way, or you can fall to pieces. As we said in the early weeks in here, you can quit, you can slander, you can bash, you can spread rumors, you can, you name it. Those things come at us, and they're not easy, and you have an opportunity to respond in a positive, negative kind of way. I've related a lot of this to coaching, and I'll come back to it. All right, go.
I think it helps to come to church and be reminded of that.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Struggling, I don't always think about that.
Mm-hmm.
I pray to God and just don't let me get through it.
I'm glad you said that.
I think that's what the church does.
I'm glad you said that. I had a slide in here, I think, a week ago, and we didn't get to it, and so I got past it. But a lot of these things we're talking about, it's one of the most beautiful things about belonging to a church family, is that when these things do come at us, it's not just all about you as an individual and your individual response, because you have a church family here to love on you, to encourage you, to a lot of people that have been through maybe what you end up facing, right? That
You need to utilize them.
absolutely, you need to lean on those people and allow them to encourage you.
Directories,
Um,
everybody's phone numbers.
Yeah. I'm meeting in a Thursday morning group right now. We meet up here at 6 o'clock, 6:15 in the morning at the fellowship hall, okay? And it's just a small group of men. And it's an accountability group for us to encourage one another and talk about what's happening and what's coming at us and what we're struggling with. And you got to have that. You need that. It is so important to have people in your life and a church family that can encourage you, love on you, pray for you, help you in those things that you're facing. This is what we think of so often when these things hit us throughout the week, and maybe it's just all of a sudden an unexpected telephone call on Tuesday, and it makes your heart just about stop. I wasn't expecting that, I didn't know my kiddo was going to call me and tell me that. The doctor's office calls, or you name it. Okay, you fill in the blank. And so it creates this, it can be this right here, okay, uncertainty, worry, anxiety ahead. This is what's coming now. And you're sitting there thinking, I just wanted to be comfortable this week. I just wanted to sit in my recliner with my remote control in hand and watch the TV, And all of a sudden, your week has just been totally shaken up, thrown off course. But you can also have this mindset of opportunities ahead. I have an opportunity to respond to this in a godly kind of way. I have an opportunity to acknowledge that my Almighty Creator is still the one who's in control of everything. Okay? That's not easy. I know it's easy for me to just stand up here and say that. It's easy for it to roll off of my tongue. We struggle with it. I say we. I struggle with it weekly, okay? But there's a mindset of uncertainty, doubt ahead, or an opportunity ahead. I don't know, I thought this was very much correct. whatever makes you uncomfortable is your biggest opportunity for growth. I could probably put in there the word most. Whatever makes you most uncomfortable is your biggest opportunity for growth. And we're going to try to get to more of that here in just a minute, because so far we've been mostly talking about these big, I know a lot of you are thinking, well, I'm not Mary, the mother of Christ. That wasn't my mission here on this earth and all that kind of stuff, the big missions. But there's smaller things, too, that make you uncomfortable. We're going to try to transition to those maybe today and next week that make you uncomfortable. There's nothing wrong, I want to reiterate this, nothing wrong with being comfortable. And whatever setting that puts you in, you get to go on some great vacations on cruise ships and the beaches of Mexico, I keep saying, and all that. Nothing wrong with being comfortable, unless that comfort leads you to believe that we are independent from God, His will, and His eternal kingdom. That's really the problem. That's where it becomes problematic, when our lives become a constant chase and pursuit of comfort to the point where we just lose connection with God and His eternal kingdom. And how He didn't create any single one of us in this room for any other reason but to be spiritual warriors for His eternal kingdom. I don't know if you understand that, if you've ever thought about that. Okay? We get so caught up in so many things throughout the week. But He did not create any single one of us for any other reason than to be spiritual warriors for His eternal kingdom. You ever thought about that? And you think about all the things that happened to you throughout the week, the month, the year, the past 5 years, the past 10 years, you name it. And He's not, I go back to that graphic I showed you a while ago. He's not interested in your personal comfort increasing. He's not interested in going, hey Keith, man, how can we send you on some more vacation time and let you sleep in some more? And He's just not. I know it's a hard truth. I enjoyed sleeping in a little bit longer yesterday morning on a Saturday when I didn't have to get out of bed super early, and just get my cup of coffee and ease into the morning and all that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, God created those moments for us too. But He's really not interested in those moments increasing for us.
I think one of our greatest dangers is when we get the idea that we actually accomplish these things and not give God the credit.
Not giving God the glory, credit. Absolutely. You're right. So you go back to I showed you this slide a while ago, and just kind of some of the things that come at us and our perception of those things that come at us. Are we seeing tough things, rough things, things that pry us out of our comfort zone as problems ahead of us, or are we seeing those things as opportunities ahead of us? And like I said earlier, we have spoken a lot about some of those bigger missions that some of these people throughout the Bible had. And I know you're sitting there saying, look, I mentioned a while ago, none of you were commissioned by God Almighty to bring Jesus into this world. I understand that. None of you were talked to by God through a burning bush that you're going to go lead the Israelites out of Egypt and part the Red Sea. And those were big missions that God had planned for those people. I get that. But you'll remember last week, if you were here last week, we talked about why being too comfortable think I put a graphic up that said, don't get too comfortable. You've heard that before, probably at some point in your life. Somebody's told you, hey, don't get too comfortable, okay? Why getting too comfortable can be a problem. And we listed several things. One of those things to me, and I think this goes back to how I opened this morning, on generationally speaking, I think it's more of a problem for our younger generations. I just think it works naturally that way, okay? But one of the things we talked about in terms of getting too comfortable is this, that you can become very much unavailable. You become very much excuse maker, unavailable. I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm selfish. I've got too many other things going on. I'm not available for God to use in whatever way that God had planned to use me. Okay? And here's the deal. God, in my opinion, I don't know, I guess he probably could. In my opinion, God's not going to force you. God can't force you to accept this mission. Oh, man, my mind just went to, and some of you that are a little older than me, the Mission Impossible, you know, the smoke coming out of it. If you decide, Pat laughed. He understood where I was at. Mission Impossible, right? If you decide to, accept this mission, I think that's where we sit every day, every week, every month. I can think of plenty of times in my life where I look backwards and I go, things as simple. I remember a story, maybe I've told it here before, back when I was at ACU as a student and another student who was in a wheelchair. I was in a rush trying to get to class in the education building and math. I think it was an algebra class or something. And I'd gone by this student in a wheelchair and I went on through the door but when I got 10, 15, 20 feet into the building, I could hear someone behind me that stopped to hold open that door for that student that was in that wheelchair. And I heard them saying thank you, and it hit me that you go, there are all these opportunities, there are all these situations that come at you, and you have a chance to serve. And you know what? If you're not going to do it, you think God's not going to find somebody else that's willing to do it? He will. Oh, my battery. Have to get my coach's voice on now, right? So that's one of my next slides is service. You know, I look at, let's think about service for a second. Service over selfishness. Because these are some of the smaller opportunities that we have. I say smaller, from what we've been talking about in here over the first 2 or 3 weeks. Service over selfishness. You know, in recent years, if you do any looking at, studying, listening to the American economy, all that kind of stuff, these service jobs are more and more people are quitting these service jobs. It's harder for these industries to find young people in their 17s, 18s, 19s, 20s, early 20s, late 20s, early 30s, to be service-oriented people. I promise you, you can go look it up, you Google it up, you'll find that the rate of decrease in these types of jobs is higher than the rate of decrease in others. Okay? Why is that?
The amount of abuse they receive.
Amount of abuse that they receive. I can agree with that. Absolutely, you're right.
They're not taught a strong work ethic.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
As youth, they're not taught a strong work ethic.
Okay. not taught maybe as strong a work ethic. I don't know if this is worth even doing. Maybe I just use my coach's voice. Oh, okay. I don't even know how to get this thing around my ear. Janine usually helps me with this, and it feels really awkward. My ear feels like it's bent to. Is that the right way to do that? I don't know. I'll just hold it. Maybe that's the way we'll do it. Yeah, I think amount of abuse that people take, I can understand that. I agree with that. I think with each generation, there's a little bit more of a selfish. When you look at these younger generations that are coming up, probably a lot of things that they deal with, in social media that really lends itself to being more and more selfish. I don't know if any of you ever took a selfie growing up. Okay? Could take a selfie. There wasn't such thing as a selfie, hardly. Okay? Putting a picture of yourself out there and statistics show that kiddos nowadays, they don't get married as quickly, and they don't have children as quick. I mean, go do the research. Go back 100 years ago. See how early people were getting married, having families, having kids and all that. Nowadays, kiddos want to take care of, they want to treat themselves right. They want to go on lots of vacations and do their own thing and make sure that they are, I'll just pull up this next slide. Do what makes you happy.
They want to start at the top.
They want to start at the top. They don't want to work their way up. They want to do what makes them happy, which will be a good lead in to where we're going next week. But, there's a difference between, I'll say this, it's probably going to be controversial, and I'll just say this too. There's a difference between being happy and being blessed. Okay? Okay? If we want to go listen to Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, he talks about blessed are those that, and you can, all the different examples that he gives. It's not about, he's not saying, happy are the ones in the world that do this, there's a difference. And I think a lot of the world today, a lot of the younger generations want this right here. They've been taught this somewhere, somehow, that you need to go take care of you. You need to go do what makes you happy. And that begins to be a place that goes against the nature of God. Because if that was what God intended for everyone and wanted out of every one of us, then this world is going to look a lot different going forward. There are already some hints of that, right? We see that every day where we go, well, people are they're out for number one. They're just out for themselves. They're not concerned with service over selfishness. They're not concerned with doing the difficult things that are uncomfortable, that make you uncomfortable, okay? In terms of service, when we talk about service, we'll pick this back up because I've got to wrap it up. But it's not easy to go serve other people. It's not easy to go. It's inconvenient for me to make a meal and deliver it to a home of someone who just lost a loved one. It's inconvenient. It's not easy. It's uncomfortable. But that's what we're called to do in service of others, love of others. Thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for your comments. That'll be it.